The alert came at noon, though calling it an alert was generous. It was more like a suggestion, a mild chime on the perimeter grid, buried beneath 6 maintenance notifications and a weather forecast that somehow included mild chance of electromagnetic fog. Jackson Reed didn't even notice it at first. He was too busy arguing with the water purifier again. "Don't you start blinking red on me, you glorified Brita," he muttered, elbow deep in a panel that smelled vaguely of ozone and regret. "We had a deal. Clean water, no drama." The purifier predictably blinked red. So he was already in a foul mood when the perimeter gate opened, with a sound that was way too casual for a planetary breach. The gate hissed, creaked, and then something stepped through. Not stomped, not hovered. Just stepped, like she was late for a meeting and not trespassing on a level 3 restricted human expansion zone. She wore armor, sleek and silver-edged, the kind that looked ceremonial but had definitely been field-tested. Her skin was pale, not just pale but luminous, with a faint blue cast like moonlight on metal. Long ears, pointed and elegant, twitched slightly as if filtering the frequency of everyone's panicked thoughts. And her hair, golden, braided, and impossibly neat for someone walking across dust fields, shone like it hadn't met a speck of dirt in its life. The 2 guards at the post, rookies, bless them, froze like statues. One of them tried to raise his weapon and only succeeded in smacking himself in the chin with the stock. She looked at him like he was a toddler trying to eat a neutron grenade. Jackson, still smeared with carbon sludge and holding a dripping filter cartridge, squinted. "Are you here for the maintenance rotation?" Her head tilted slightly, not in confusion, more like disbelief. She took 2 steps closer. The guards backed up, bumping into each other like badly programmed NPCs. Jackson stayed where he was, casually flicking goop off the cartridge. "I am not," she said, voice cool and clipped, with an accent that hinted at languages layered over centuries. "Who are you?" "Jackson Reed," he replied cheerfully. "Engineer, part-time insult collector, full-time savior of aquatic infrastructure. You?" Her eyes narrowed, calculating. "You do not fear me. Well, you're not the water purifier, so you've already got points in your favor." He tossed the cartridge into a bin with a splash and wiped his hands on a rag that probably violated at least 3 sanitation codes. "Look, if you're here to conquer, just do it after lunch. We're having synthesis soup, supposedly chicken." Behind him, one of the guards choked on his own breath. The other looked like he might cry. She took another step forward. The air shifted, not hot, not cold, just different, denser, charged. Jackson felt it in his teeth. "You do not understand what I am," she said. He shrugged. "I barely understand my own tax forms." Her expression didn't change, but something in her stance eased. Microscopic, but there. A fraction of a breath, less tension. "My name is Alaris," she said. "You may have heard of me." Jackson scratched his cheek. "Alaris. Alaris. Oh, right. You're the one who turned that orbital fleet into confetti above Arlen 3. Big party. Sparkly bits everywhere. That was a battle." "Sure, but you've got to admit, it had a certain New Year's vibe." She stared at him like she was trying to determine if his skull was decorative. "You are mocking me." "A little," he admitted, but respectfully. Behind them, the guards were slowly inching away. Jackson gave them a thumbs up without looking. "You are supposed to be afraid," she said. A trace of something. Was that frustration in her voice now? "I was built to be feared." "Well," Jackson said, grabbing his tool case, "they built the purifier to be reliable, and it still leaks into my socks. So maybe builders aren't the gold standard." She didn't move as he walked past her, headed toward the habitat dome. After a few seconds, she turned and followed. "You're not going to vaporize me, are you?" he asked over his shoulder. "No." "Then I suggest you keep up. I'm on a tight schedule of sarcasm and circuitry." As they reached the dome, a small maintenance drone zipped by, beeped at Alaris, then spun in a confused circle and shorted out midair. Jackson sighed. "That's Jerry. Don't take it personally. He panics around competent people." Alaris looked around as the airlock hissed open. Inside, the corridor was narrow and cluttered. plastered with warning signs that had clearly lost all meaning. Caution, toxic fumes was stuck on the coffee machine. Jackson led her to the central hub, which doubled as his workshop and tripled as the break room. A kettle whistled gently in the corner. Tea, he offered. She blinked. You are offering me tea? Well, it's technically algae derivative, but we pretend it's tea. He poured 2 cups, handed her one. She sniffed it, suspicious. Is this a test? Nope. If it glows, we throw it out. She sipped, paused. It does not glow. Success, Jackson said, raising his cup. To not glowing beverages and moderately non-fatal hospitality. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. Why are you not afraid? He tilted his head, considering. I guess you're not what I expected. And what did you expect? Flaming eyes, maybe. Immediate incineration. Possibly a dramatic monologue. Ilaris snorted. It was brief, involuntary, and quickly smothered. But it was there. You are strange. And you're not as scary when you're drinking moss juice out of a tin mug. She set her cup down. They say I am a monster. He leaned against the counter. They also say the coffee here is safe. People say a lot of things. She stood, armor clinking softly. You are either foolish or very brave. Jackson smiled. Or maybe I'm just really bad at reading warning labels. Ilaris turned toward the exit. I will stay for now. He nodded. Great. You break it, you fix it. She paused at the door. You assume I will break something? Statistically likely, he said, but I'm optimistic. As she stepped out into the corridor, he called after her. Hey, do you like potatoes? A pause, then, they are acceptable. Good, he said. You're on root vegetable rotation tomorrow. Ilaris stared at the potato with something between suspicion and philosophical distress. It sat in her gloved hand like an object of cosmic mockery, dusty and perfectly mundane. Across the table, Jackson shoveled diced tubers into a sizzling pan, humming off-key to a song that only he seemed to know. The kitchen smelled like oil, thyme, and mild desperation. This, she said, holding the potato higher, as if it might explain itself, is not a vegetable. It is a geological formation. It's versatile, Jackson replied, tossing in another handful of chopped onions. Mashed, fried, baked, weaponized. I once used one to jam a hostile drone's rotor. Exploded like a starch grenade. She lowered the potato slowly. Your species uses food as munitions? Only when absolutely necessary, he said. Or when we're bored. She watched as he stirred the mix with unearned confidence. Your technique is aggressive. Culinary bravery. Look it up. She didn't. Instead, she poked the potato, then placed it delicately on the counter as if it might detonate. Jackson, to his credit, didn't laugh. Much. The smell of the cooking filled the small room until it almost covered the faint scent of ozone from the malfunctioning power regulator. Almost. They ate in silence, which in Jackson's company was more like a quiet intermission than actual stillness. Ilaris watched him more than she watched the food. He ate with the determined focus of someone who tasted too many rations and found actual cooking to be a sacred act. She tried a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then said, Your seasoning is unbalanced. Unbalanced is where the magic happens. Magic should not taste this earthy. That's the charm of root vegetables. They remind you of where you came from, or where you're headed if the reactor core goes critical. Her gaze shifted slightly. Does it go critical often? He shrugged. Only on days ending in Y. They moved through the day like a bizarre duet, Jackson patching up wiring systems with the enthusiasm of a caffeine-fueled goblin. Ilaris watching silently, sometimes correcting him with a single arched brow that made him mutter under his breath. She helped him recalibrate the solar buffer array, though she had to disable the voice prompts because they kept referring to her as unauthorized entity, threat classification Alpha 9. She tore out the audio unit with surgical precision. Your machines are melodramatic. They learned from us. Later, while Jackson tried to realign the satellite uplink dish by smacking it with a wrench and shouting inspirational slogans, Ilaris ran diagnostics on the dome's shielding. She frowned at the results, then frowned harder at the frown, as if annoyed it had happened without her consent. Your defense matrix is outdated, she said. I know. The parts for the upgrade got rerouted to Sector 12. Something about budget restrictions and a sudden infestation of carnivorous moss. She turned to him. Moss? Very bitey, surprisingly political. Elleris blinked slowly. And yet your fear remains reserved for the coffee machine. That thing growls at night. She tilted her head. Growls? Like a small angry bear with digestive issues. They walked the perimeter after that, boots crunching on gravel, distant stars flickering like half-forgotten gods overhead. The night was sharp, clean, and too quiet for Jackson's taste, so he filled it with commentary about constellations that didn't exist and theories about why the dome's north side always smelled faintly of cinnamon. Elleris said nothing for a long time, then asked, Do all humans fill silence with absurdities? Only the interesting ones. She glanced sideways. Then I've met very few interesting ones. Now that's just mean, he said, pretending to be wounded. I'm a delight, a solar-powered ray of entertainment. You're a malfunctioning AI in organic form. Flatterer. They stopped at the edge of the field where the automated seeders were supposed to be working. Two of them had apparently given up on farming and were now doing a slow, awkward dance with their mechanical arms in the air. Jackson sighed. That's the third time this week. They keep downloading dance tutorials instead of firmware updates. Elleris raised an eyebrow. This is what your machines evolve into? It's art. It's flailing. Art is subjective. She overrode their programming with a single gesture, fingers skimming the control panel like a pianist playing a dirge. The machines froze, then realigned into neat, obedient rows. Jackson clapped once, slow and theatrical. Teach me your ways, O wise reprogrammer of discobots. She ignored him, but her mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. By the time they returned to the dome, the interior lighting had shifted to its softer evening hue. Jackson flopped onto a chair in the common room and propped his feet on the table. Elleris remained standing, arms crossed, gaze locked on something distant through the window. A storm forming on the horizon, luminous and pale, crawling like a living bruise across the dark. He noticed her quiet. Not the usual controlled silence, but a deeper stillness. You all right? She didn't answer immediately. Then, storms like that do not exist on my world. What are your storms like? They don't give warnings. They simply begin and end. Efficient, merciless. He sat up. That's not the same thing. She looked at him then, eyes colder than usual. You see me as a guest, a curiosity, but you don't understand what I've done, what I am. He held her gaze. You keep saying that like it'll scare me eventually. It should. Why? Because you've done things I wouldn't approve of? I've microwaved tuna in a shared kitchen. I know guilt. This isn't a joke. Neither was the tuna. She turned away sharply, but he caught the edge of her expression. Something fraying, raw. Regret maybe, or exhaustion, maybe both. Elleris, he said, quieter now. You're here. You're helping. That counts for something. She didn't answer, but she didn't leave the room either. The storm rolled closer, casting strange shadows across the dome's surface. The silence stretched, and this time he didn't try to fill it. Not yet. Then she said, almost too softly, Why do you speak to me like I'm just a person? He thought about it. Because I think maybe you want to be. She looked at him. For a second, just a second, all the armor and legend and terrible weight of her name seemed to fade. And then she said, The potato was undercooked. He smiled. You should have seen the meatloaf. Jackson discovered the note stuck to the coffee machine before sunrise. It was written in blocky, careful penmanship with no punctuation, and read, Stop speaking to me, I am trying to sleep. He stared at it while sipping something that may or may not have originally been coffee. The machine gurgled a low protest, like a beast resenting the act of being milked. Elleris entered the room precisely 23 seconds later, hair damp from a sonic rinse, wearing a shirt she had clearly borrowed from his laundry pile. It was leaking sound pulses again, she said before he could ask. I traced the source to your attempts at morning conversation. I was being polite. You were singing. It was a gentle hum. It woke the greenhouse. He raised his mug. I'm sure the tomatoes appreciated the serenade. They attempted to climb the walls. They're passionate. She moved to the console, swiping through a stream of data from the outer perimeter sensors. Her brow furrowed slightly. The storm changed trajectory. It's moving back this way. Jackson leaned in, ignoring the machine's spiteful hiss. Back? That's not how wind works. This isn't wind. It's something else. The ion trail is braided. Braided like a cosmic braid or like a hair braid? She looked at him. What is the difference? One is an adorable hairstyle. The other is a cosmic red flag. She ignored that and brought up a spectral overlay. The swirls of energy on the screen pulsed in eerie rhythm, like something breathing in slow, deliberate waves. Jackson's usual smart remarks died in his throat. That's not a normal storm, is it? No. And we're not evacuating because? Because the evacuation beacon you installed 3 months ago is currently functioning as a coat rack. He blinked. I had nowhere else to hang my socks. She didn't reply. She just kept tapping through readings, the screen flickering as the storm crept closer. Jackson stood beside her in the soft glow of the monitors, half expecting something monstrous to step out of the digital static. Are you worried? He asked quietly. She didn't look up. I don't worry. I calculate, and what do your calculations say? That we have approximately 14 hours before the storm breaches the outer shield. Perhaps less, depending on whether the generator decides to spontaneously combust. Again? Again. Should I prepare snacks? Yes. High protein, possibly throwable. They spent the next few hours in a flurry of mildly controlled chaos. Jackson argued with the ventilation system about its temperature preferences, while Alaris upgraded the shielding code in a language that looked like a hybrid of mathematics and ancient curses. They found a nest of self-replicating cleaning bots trying to unionize behind the cargo lockers. Alaris dissolved them with a glance. I am starting to understand why you are considered a terrifying myth, Jackson said as she recompiled the dome's magnetic grid with one hand. It is not myth, it is history. Still, if I had a medal for every time you saved us, I'd have two. You'd have 2 medals. And a very short ceremony. She smiled slightly. Not the full thing, just the corner. By midday, the storm reached visual range. Low violet tendrils licking at the sky like alien ink. Jackson watched it from the roof hatch while chewing a protein bar that claimed to taste like galactic berry, but mostly tasted like regret. Alaris joined him, silent for a long moment. You shouldn't be up here. Why? The electromagnetic field is already disrupting thought clarity. Oh, that explains why I was about to ask if clouds had feelings. They do, but they are unkind. They stood there together, watching as the sky turned unnatural colors. The air began to shimmer with static. Alaris closed her eyes. Her ears twitched once. Subtle, but there. And Jackson knew something was shifting beneath her surface. Does this remind you of home? He asked. She was quiet a moment. Yes, but not the good parts. He looked at her profile, sharp, luminous, alien, and yet somehow familiar. You don't talk much about it. There's little to say that doesn't sound like warning. I don't mind warnings, I collect them. This one is old, she said, voice softer than the wind. My kind was shaped by storms like these. The atmospheric anomalies aren't just weather, they're alive. Thought echoes from a war too vast to name. Our ancestors harvested them, used them, became them. And you? I walked away. He nodded slowly. You do that a lot. Do what? Walk away from things. Except me. You stayed. That was an error in judgment. He smiled. You keep making it. I keep recalculating. The storm howled above them now, the energy pressing down like invisible pressure. They returned to the control center where the generators buzzed like angry bees with god complexes. The shield walls groaned. Alaris input something into the control panel that made the entire station flicker. Jackson watched her fingers move. Delicate, exact, deadly. You've done this before. Twice. How'd it go? The first time, I saved a continent. The second time, I sank a moon. 50-50 odds then. Those are better than usual. He reached for a loose wire, then thought better of it. Tell me something personal, something real, before the sky tries to kill us. She didn't answer right away. Then, my real name is Alaris. He blinked. What is it? You cannot pronounce it. Try me. She made a sound. It was like wind through broken glass, mixed with whale song and static. He stared. Okay, yes, that was more of an audio experience than a name. She looked faintly pleased. It means one who endures the unmaking. He whistled. And I thought Jackson was dramatic. The dome shuddered. Lights dimmed. Alarms pulsed red. Ellery stood tall, eyes narrowing, body aligned like a blade waiting to strike. Jackson flipped switches that probably didn't need flipping, more for emotional support than utility. Then the storm hit. It hit like memory, like grief with claws. The walls screamed with energy. The sky outside vanished. Inside, the systems flickered in and out like they couldn't decide what reality to stick with. Jackson tried to anchor himself with a joke, but the air had weight now. Seriousness crawled in. Alaris moved through it like she was born of it. She placed her hand on the console. Her skin lit up, blue, then gold, then something older, something deeper. The storm responded, or resisted, or both. Jackson shouted, "What are you doing?" She said, calm as ever, "What I was made for." And the storm screamed louder. Jackson wasn't entirely sure if he was alive. There was a moment, just a second, where he thought he had become a memory, or maybe a light fixture. Everything had gone white, then black, then white again. The universe had performed a blinking contest, and Jackson lost. When his eyes finally registered shapes, he was lying on the floor of the control room, clutching a mug with no bottom and staring up at the flickering ceiling like it owed him rent. Alaris stood in the center of it all, unharmed, unshaken, radiating the kind of calm usually reserved for statues or mildly judgmental librarians. Her hands still glowed faintly. The console beneath them was cracked, sizzling, but no longer possessed by the storm's rage. The storm itself had dimmed. It didn't retreat so much as it had been told, very politely and very firmly, to leave. "You good?" Jackson croaked from the floor. "I am operational," she replied. He sat up slowly, checking for missing limbs or new ones. "Define operational." "My systems are functional. The dome is holding. You are conscious." "That last one is debatable." She offered him a hand. He accepted it, more because he didn't trust his legs than anything else. "Did we win?" he asked. There was no victory, only containment. Wow. Way to take the joy out of surviving a cataclysm. The storm was not an enemy, it was a remnant. A ghost. He blinked. We just got haunted by weather? It remembered what it used to be, and it didn't like being forgotten. Well, that's relatable. Alaris stepped over to a side panel and began recalibrating the shield harmonics. Jackson wandered behind her like a stray electron, touching things that buzzed with warning and pretending he knew what any of them meant. "You were glowing," he said after a beat, "like a small supernova. That normal for you?" She didn't turn. "It is. Part of what I was built for." "You say that a lot. Built. You weren't born?" "I was constructed." He frowned. "Like a machine?" "Number. Like a storm. That is both terrifying and oddly poetic. It is inconvenient." She finally turned to him. Her ears were still faintly luminous, the tips pulsing with residual energy. Her eyes shimmered like deep water, alien, endless, but with something softer now, something almost human. He said, "I'm guessing most people don't stick around long enough to see this version of you." Number most run or kneel. You hate that, don't you? She hesitated. I do not understand reverence or fear. Both are cages. And me? You are a feral noise that refuses to obey protocol. He grinned. So, your favorite. She almost smiled again. Almost. Then she said, I need to rest. The integration with the storm drained more than I anticipated. Do you sleep in the conventional way or just stare at walls until your systems reboot? I dream. Jackson blinked. Really? Yes. What about? Mostly equations. Sometimes fire. He scratched his head. Mine usually involve flying or forgetting to wear pants at meetings. That explains much. She retreated to her chamber, more of a meditation chamber than a bedroom, really. Jackson busied himself with trying to repair the snack dispenser, which had decided now was the right time to begin speaking fluent binary. When the night cycle arrived, the station lights dimmed to a soft hum. Outside, the remnants of the storm floated like bruises in the sky. Inside, Jackson stared at the ceiling and wondered how one person could feel both so small and so essential at once. The next day began with alarms. He fell out of bed with an undignified yelp and hit the comms panel. "Is it the weather again? Because I've run out of socks and heroic speeches." Alaris's voice came through, cool and alert. "Not weather, visitors." That word was never comforting when spoken by someone with interstellar notoriety. He sprinted to the observation deck, skidding to a halt beside her. Outside, just beyond the shield, hovered a sleek craft, dark silver, with sharp curves and no visible markings. It emitted no signal, no ID, just presence. "Friends of yours?" Jackson asked. "Not anymore." The ship pulsed once, then again. "They're trying to scan us," she said. "Do we scan back?" "I block them. They will escalate." He looked at her. "Do I want to know what escalate means in this context?" She pressed a few commands. "They will attempt to retrieve me." "Retrieve? They consider me property." Jackson squinted. "You're not property. You're a snarky, terrifying miracle." "Tell them that. Perhaps they will leave." A long silence passed. The ship outside began to deploy spindly limbs, like metallic insects stretching after a nap. Jackson's bravado wilted slightly. "So, plan? I have one." "Does it involve me dying?" "That is a variable." "Terrific." She walked toward the lower hangar. He followed because logic had long since lost its hold on him. Down in the depths of the station, Alaris opened a sealed crate Jackson had never seen before. Inside was something that looked suspiciously like a giant tuning fork mated with a flamethrower. "Please tell me that's a weapon." "It is an interface disruptor, technically non-lethal." "Technically?" "Depending on the species." He sighed. "Have I mentioned how much I enjoy our relaxing, uneventful days? Only during explosions." They returned topside as the enemy vessel lowered itself further, pressing into the atmosphere with aggressive elegance. A voice finally cracked through the comms, cold, metallic, and far too calm. "Subject designation EL7. Prepare for reabsorption." Jackson leaned into the mic. "She's not available. Please leave a message after the tone." A pause, then a hiss. They opened fire. The station shook like a drunk washing machine as the disruptor charged in Alaris's hands. Outside, the alien ship spread its limbs and sent tendrils of blue light scraping across the dome, searching for weaknesses or, at the very least, a decent Wi-Fi signal. Alarms blared with all the grace of a screaming toddler. Jackson, trying not to be reduced to decorative ash, had just enough time to strap himself into the nearest wall chair and yell something deeply brave and masculine like, "Please don't let me explode." Alaris stood calmly in front of the viewport. The disruptor braced against her shoulder, her long ears flicking slightly as she calibrated the weapon's oscillation. She looked less like a woman preparing for battle and more like someone about to play a particularly aggressive symphony. "They are scanning for structural weaknesses," she said. "Oh, good," Jackson muttered. "Maybe they will find my self-esteem." The first impact came with the sound of metal shrieking. The second tore a gash along the outer corridor. The ship wanted in, and it was done asking nicely. "You sure this thing only disrupts?" he asked, eyeing the glowing coils of her weapon. "Disruption is a flexible term." "You know what else is a flexible term? Lawsuits and spinal columns." Alaris ignored him, stepped forward and opened a direct channel. Her voice went out like thunder. "Disengage. You will not take me." A pause followed by static, then a voice. Calculated, male, clipped like a bureaucrat's sigh. "You are property of the Axis Vault. Return or face dismantlement." "You can't dismantle people," Jackson snapped, hopping out of the chair and running to the backup terminal. "Well, you can, but it's rude, and also illegal in several star systems, including ours." We own her, the voice said. No, you built her, Jackson replied. But she made herself. The ship didn't answer. Instead, it deployed a boarding pod that sliced through the shield like a scalpel. Eloise raised the disruptor. Jackson winced. The moment the pod breached, she fired. A shock wave tore across the air like a scream made of static and broken physics. The intruding beam stuttered, folded inward, and with a crack like glass giving up, imploded into a cluster of smoke and sparking debris. Did you just fold reality? Jackson asked. A small corner. Do I still have bones? She looked him over. Most of them. The ship reeled, literally. It pulled back, shuddering like it had been slapped by a cosmic parent. Hilaris walked toward the console and rerouted the station's remaining power into a tight transmission beam. Then she said, Jackson, when I tell you, open channel 3. Not before. Why? Because I'm going to say something I can't unsay. He watched her, this strange, luminous being who was once only a story meant to frighten children or rally troops. She looked back at him, no longer untouchable, no longer weapon or symbol, just a person, scared and furious and tired of being a myth. She raised the mic. You want me? She said to the ship. Then hear me. Jackson hit channel 3. Elleris spoke in a language older than the stars, a harmonic thread woven into the architecture of the Axis Vault itself. It wasn't speech. It was code, raw and unfiltered, broadcast like a beacon. For one blinding second, the ship paused. Its lights flickered, its tendrils sagged. Then came the silence, and then it turned. The vessel reversed, slowly, as if rethinking its entire life plan. One final pulse echoed from it, less a threat, more a query, and then it was gone, vanishing into the clouds like a retreating thought. Jackson slumped against the console. Did you just tell them to leave you alone in your ancient murder language? I told them I was no longer theirs, Hilaris replied. I told them I had chosen, and that I was not coming back. He blinked at her. And they listened? I included schematics of what I'd do if they didn't. Ah, the universal language. Don't test me. She powered down the disruptor and walked toward the center of the room. It is done, Jackson followed. So, what now? Do we just resume normal station duties? Run inventory? Play cards? I do not know. He looked at her carefully. Do you know who you are now? She thought for a moment. Less than before, but I think that's good. Uncertainty builds character, he said, and possibly ulcers. They moved through the damaged halls, past scarred metal and flickering lights. Repairs could wait. The silence wasn't threatening anymore. It was a kind of peace. Jackson offered her a seat in the lounge, then handed her the last surviving packet of coffee substitute, which she accepted with the ceremonial disdain of someone who knew exactly how bad it would taste. He sat beside her. So, Hilaris, alien storm lady, former weapon, current roommate, what do you want to do now? She tilted her head. I want to watch the sunrise. That's it? For now. They sat like that as the world outside shifted. The last tendrils of the failed storm drifted away, and the light crept across the broken land like forgiveness. Hilaris leaned back, her long ears twitching slightly in the warmth, and Jackson, for once, didn't say anything. But after a moment, she did. You never answered my question. He looked over. Which one? When I first arrived, when I asked why you weren't afraid of me. He smiled, small and sincere. Because you looked at me like you didn't want to be feared. And I figured, maybe you just needed someone who didn't. She blinked slowly. That is inefficient logic. Welcome to humanity. He bumped her shoulder with his, careful and light. You're one of us now. Hope you're ready to be disappointed and undercaffeinated. She gave a soft laugh, almost a glitch in the melody of the room. I think I'm ready. They watched the sun rise on a world that had learned to breathe again. The Interstellar Summit on Tarsus Haven was the kind of event where entire civilizations could declare war over the wrong canapé. Delegates buzzed through the grand hall, draped in ceremonial robes, gleaming exosuits, and vapor cloaks that smelled faintly of burnt sugar. It was diplomacy at its finest, veiled threats wrapped in polite nods and translations that always came out sounding more insulting than intended. Lucas Wren, Earth's least celebrated diplomatic attaché, stood awkwardly beside a glowing sculpture of something that looked like a squid mid-existential crisis, holding a half-empty glass of Xerian fizz and trying to figure out how to escape unnoticed. He had attended with one job: stay quiet, don't spill anything, and definitely don't talk to royalty. So of course, by the end of the evening, he had done all three. It began with a tray of floating appetizers. Lucas had been trying to chase down a puffed Glarin tart, possibly sentient, definitely evasive, when a glint of movement caught his eye near the mezzanine balcony. The crowd around him didn't notice, all too busy arguing over trade routes and whose planetary anthem would close the night. But Lucas saw the shimmer of cloaking tech, the way light bent too neatly. A second later, a dart shot out from the air and streaked straight toward the tall, pale figure in the center of the hall. Queen Soraya of Velaroon didn't flinch. Maybe she didn't even see it. Maybe that was part of the royal training. Look dignified even when your organs are about to be turned into slurry. Lucas, on the other hand, moved on sheer instinct and caffeine. He lunged not heroically, not gracefully, but with the chaotic momentum of someone who had tripped on his own foot just as the dart sailed past. His shoulder collided with the queen's, knocking her sideways. The dart embedded itself in the base of the decorative squid sculpture, which promptly exploded in a puff of lavender mist and gave a final squeal that sounded weirdly relieved. Screaming, guards, blasters drawn, at least 6 languages cursing in stereo. Lucas was face down on the floor, being pinned by something with too many limbs, while someone else shouted, "Human toxin deployment confirmed?" It took 3 full minutes and the intervention of a very annoyed Velaroon advisor to sort things out. Eventually, Queen Soraya rose, unharmed. Her pale skin shimmered faintly, eyes bright like twin moons under her golden braid, and her long ears twitched once, slightly to the left, which Lucas would later learn meant amusement. She stared down at him as if he were a particularly puzzling fungus. "You moved with surprising recklessness," she said. Lucas groaned. "I prefer to call it spontaneous spatial repositioning in the face of airborne projectiles." The queen blinked, slowly. "You threw yourself in front of a sovereign ruler. To be fair, I thought you were a waiter with a snack tray." Someone gasped. Another person fainted. A translator orb buzzed angrily. Yet Soraya tilted her head, and her mouth curved. Barely, but unmistakably. By the time Lucas was cleaned up, debriefed, checked for psychic tampering, and presented with a small gift bag of interstellar gratitude tokens, the incident was already being broadcast across 3 sectors. Earth's delegate wanted to kill him. The Velaroon delegation wanted to honor him. And Lucas mostly wanted to go back to his room and find out if room service delivered anything without eyes. But instead, he was summoned. The room was circular and soft with shifting hues that responded to emotional states. Lucas's presence caused the walls to pulse an anxious green until a technician recalibrated it to mildly confused beige. Queen Soraya stood at the center, flanked by silent guards in opaline armor. She wore a flowing tunic that shimmered between violet and gold, her long ears twitching as she studied him. "You saved my life." "Technically, I saved the sculpture's life. You were just standing in front of it." Her eyes didn't waver. "On Velaroon, such acts are not met with mere thanks. I was hoping for a medal, maybe a sandwich?" She stepped closer. Lucas resisted the urge to back away. Not because she was intimidating, though she was, but because she had the kind of presence that made you feel like your shoes were too loud. She reached into a satchel beside her and pulled out a crystalline object. It glowed faintly, with threads of light spiraling inside it like captured starlight. "This is the soul shard," she said. "It is not just a gift. It is the eternal loyalty of my soul." Lucas blinked. "Wow, that's really something. I don't think I have a thank you card that big." "I am bound to you now," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "As tradition dictates, my oath is sealed." He stared at her, then the shard, then back to her. "Wait, is this like a metaphor? Are we talking spiritual loyalty, or like, you need help moving furniture loyalty?" It is deeper than blood, deeper than time. You have saved me. Now I am yours. Yours, Lucas repeated, as in soul-binding yours. Not like pet fish yours? Soraya frowned. Do you mock our customs? Oh, absolutely, but only when they sound like the start of a romantic tragedy. There was a long silence. One of the guards coughed politely, then stood straighter. Lucas swallowed. Look, he said more gently, I really didn't mean to cause any interstellar entanglements. I was just trying to not get skewered. I'm not royalty. I don't even know what side of the fork to use at a diplomatic dinner. She regarded him quietly. Then slowly she held out the soul shard. I will not rescind my vow, but I will give you time to understand it. Lucas took the shard and it pulsed once in his palm. Warm, almost alive. Well, he said, at least it's pretty. Do I have to feed it or walk it? She didn't laugh, but her ear twitched again. To the left. Behind them the wall shifted to a soft lavender. The Velaran queen bowed, deeply, formally, and Lucas Wren, Earth's least reliable attaché, officially became the most diplomatically entangled human in the galaxy. Lucas woke to the soothing voice of the diplomatic AI, calmly announcing that he was late. Not just 5 more minutes late, but doomsday protocol initialized late. He bolted upright, tangled in the silken bedspread of his assigned suite, blinking at the ceiling display which now read, Negotiation Summit commences in 16 minutes. Refreshment service terminated due to urgency. He staggered to the mirror and winced. His hair was doing that weird thing where one side stuck out like it had been electrically seduced. He'd fallen asleep with the soul shard on the pillow beside him, and it had migrated under his chin sometime during the night. It now glowed faintly in his shirt pocket, pulsing to the rhythm of his heartbeat. He wasn't sure if that was touching or mildly horrifying. As he ran out the door with one boot half zipped and a breakfast bar in his mouth, he nearly collided with a pair of Velaroon guards stationed outside. They gave him synchronized nods and turned with military precision to escort him through the glass-paneled corridors. Lucas tried not to look too out of breath, or guilty, or like a man who had accidentally accepted a cosmic binding of souls from an alien monarch. Queen Soraya was already seated in the high chamber when he arrived. Her posture was effortlessly regal, her tunic a deeper shade of silver today, and her ears flicked once at his arrival. A motion he was beginning to associate with barely contained amusement. Around them, the delegates of 16 civilizations were gathered in a floating amphitheater, shaped like an inverted blossom, each petal housing a species whose diplomatic style ranged from icy civility to high-pitched interpretive dance. Lucas took his seat beside Soraya, trying to ignore the stares. It wasn't easy. News of the Soul Shard incident, as it was now lovingly termed by the galactic press, had spread like wildfire. He could already imagine the headlines. Earthman accidentally marries alien queen, causes minor constitutional crisis. Is it too late to pretend I'm someone else? He muttered to her under his breath. Her eyes didn't leave the delegates. I would recognize you by your walk alone. That's either very sweet or a subtle critique of my posture. Soraya said nothing, but one ear twitched again. He called that a win. The summit began with the usual ceremonial exchange of scents, which involved spritzing coated pheromones into the air. Lucas received a vial labeled Essence of Reluctant Unity and tried not to sneeze when the mist hit his face. The Solgari envoy, a floating jellyfish covered in glittering lenses, offered a scent so pungent that a Yotharian diplomat promptly fainted and had to be revived with electric tongue pulses. Despite the chaos, the first few hours went surprisingly well. Soraya spoke with practiced elegance, her voice amplified by a sonic lace woven into her collar. Lucas mostly nodded, whispered occasional commentary, and tried to hide the fact that he was playing diplomatic bingo in his head. Passive-aggressive compliment and veiled planetary threat got him 2 squares in under 10 minutes. Then the Keldari ambassador leaned forward. We've heard of your binding, she said, her tone slick with curiosity. Does this mean Earth has pledged allegiance to Velaroon? Lucas choked on his water. Soraya answered without missing a beat. It means the Queen of Velaroon honors a life debt in accordance with sacred law. Earth as a planet remains unaffiliated. Soraya's gaze flicked to him. How do you know this? I may have sold parts of those systems back when I was on Vega 4. It was a phase. I needed money for grad school. Murmurs rippled across the room. One delegate openly gasped. The jellyfish lantern creature whispered something into its translation box that came out as fascinatingly unethical. Lucas raised a hand. In my defense, it was for an art history degree, which explains the poor decisions, Soraya added. He smiled. Glad to know the Queen's loyalty doesn't exempt me from burns. They traced the signal relay to a shadow company called Cyrex Orbital Logistics, a name so boring it practically screamed evil. Lucas sighed. We used to call them the people who'd smuggle plutonium if it came in a gift box. The council adjourned with a flurry of data packets and encrypted comms. Soraya pulled Lucas aside as they exited into a quieter corridor, lit by strips of bioluminescent algae embedded in the walls. You recognize that tech faster than our analysts. Your knowledge is valuable. He held up his hands. Be careful. That sounds dangerously close to a compliment. She stopped walking. I bound my soul to yours in a gesture of sacred loyalty. I think I'm allowed one compliment per galactic crisis. Lucas studied her face, noting the faint shadows under her eyes. Even alien queens looked exhausted after political warfare. You okay? He asked. There are too many variables, too many unseen players. I trust few. Well, lucky for you, he said, nudging her elbow. I'm not good at playing anything except shuffleboard and sarcasm. She didn't smile exactly, but her expression softened. Her ear twitched again. He took that as a laugh in her language. Later that evening, Lucas returned to his quarters and found his door open. He stepped in carefully, fingers curling around a portable stun device shaped like a tube of lip balm. Standard issue for Earth diplomats who insisted they weren't in danger, but wanted to feel cool about it. Inside, a small mechanical sphere hovered midair, scanning the room with a quiet chirp. It spun toward him. Unknown biological signature. Hello. Do not panic. This is a subtle intrusion. Lucas lowered the stun device. Subtle? You broke into my room and announced it. The sphere beeped. Subtle by galactic diplomatic standards. I am not armed. Great. That makes two of us. It bobbed closer. I am here on behalf of a benefactor who wishes to acquire the artifact the Queen gave you. In exchange, you may choose a planetary estate, 100 years of luxury, or the entire vintage film archive of Earth. Lucas squinted. Wait, you're trying to bribe me with movies? Restored in 8D immersion, includes the original director's notes from Fast and Furious, Lunar Justice. He folded his arms. I don't think you get how sacred the soul shard is. We understand its significance. That is precisely why we want it. Lucas crossed the room, picked up a pillow and chucked it through the sphere. The bot squealed and zipped out the door, trailing sparks. When he told Soraya about it, she didn't even look surprised. There will be more, she said. The soul shard is not only symbolic, it grants partial resonance to my psionic signature. With it, someone could mimic my voice print to access royal command nodes. Lucas blinked. You mean they could pretend to be you? For approximately 8 seconds, long enough to do catastrophic things. He whistled. And here I thought I was just carrying a shiny magic rock. Turns out I'm walking around with the key to your kingdom in my shirt. Soraya tilted her head. Does that concern you? A little, he admitted. But mostly I'm impressed you trusted me with it. She looked him in the eye. I still do. Lucas didn't have a response for that. Not one he could say out loud anyway. Later, alone in his room, he held the soul shard in his palm. It pulsed faintly, warm and alive. Somewhere behind all the humor and strange turns his life had taken, he understood that this wasn't just politics. This was the beginning of something deeper, and possibly very, very stupid, which, to be fair, described most of the important things in his life. Lucas was pretty sure that if someone ever made a list of places you should not be while holding the royal soul shard of an alien monarchy, standing in a floating gondola above a city made entirely of magnetically suspended glass towers during a festival involving copious amounts of fireworks and fermented slug nectar would be somewhere near the top. But there he was, gripping the orb in his pocket and trying not to get vertigo, while a giant balloon shaped like a galactic squid drifted overhead. The ambassador gave a predator's smile. And if Earth were to request an alliance, would your soul binding extend to their defense? Lucas leaned towards Soraya and whispered, "Okay, I get it now. I'm the shiny new toy everyone wants to steal." She murmured back, "You are a symbol of trust, which in diplomacy is more dangerous than a fleet of warships. I really wish someone had told me that before I tackled you." She finally turned to face him fully. "And if they had, would you have stayed behind?" Lucas opened his mouth, closed it, rubbed the back of his neck. "Honestly, I was aiming for the canapé." The session adjourned for mid-cycle refreshments. Soraya led him to a private chamber where the walls gently rotated through scenes from Velarun. Crystalline forests, twin moons, glowing rivers that pulsed with bioluminescent life. Lucas paced in a slow circle, stopping to examine a plant that looked suspiciously like it could slap him. "So, just to clarify," he said, "you're not in love with me, right?" She arched one pale brow. "Would it disturb you if I were?" "No, it would just mean I've got even more people misunderstanding our relationship. The soul shard is not a romantic binding. It is sacred loyalty, a vow of protection, trust, devotion. Got it? So, like an eternal bodyguard, with cool hair." Soraya's expression remained still, but her ear flicked. "You are remarkably casual about sacred rites. I cope with awkwardness through humor. It's either that or cry in the utility closet." They sat in silence for a while, the soul shard resting on the table between them, casting a slow rhythmic glow. Lucas finally exhaled and leaned back. "So, what now?" "Now we prepare," she said, rising. "There will be consequences. Someone tried to assassinate me. That was not a lone act." Lucas frowned. "You think it was part of a bigger plan?" "I know it was. The question is who benefits, and how far they're willing to go." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, not as a queen or a glowing presence of otherworldly beauty, but as someone who had made a terrifyingly real choice in the heat of a moment. She hadn't hesitated. She'd given him a piece of her soul. "Guess I'm in this now," he said. "You are." She turned toward the door. "And you still have breakfast on your collar." Lucas looked down. "Well, that explains the strange stares from the Mermathi delegation. I thought they just hated Earth fashion." As they left the chamber, the soul shard pulsed once more, a faint echo of something ancient stirring beneath the politics. Something Lucas couldn't name yet, but knew he was only beginning to understand. Lucas had never been summoned to a war council before. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the room he stepped into didn't scream impending doom so much as high-stakes book club. There were no tactical holograms, no flashing lights or urgent alarm tones, just a long obsidian table around which 10 very serious-looking beings sat, including Soraya, whose expression betrayed no emotion whatsoever. Lucas instinctively tugged on his shirt like a nervous intern showing up at the wrong meeting. "I brought snacks," he muttered to himself, producing a protein bar from his pocket that he immediately stuffed back when one of the delegates hissed at him. Soraya gestured to the empty seat beside her. Lucas sat, trying to appear less like a misplaced tourist and more like someone whose soul was technically bound to royalty. "This is Lucas Tren," she said to the others, her voice cutting clean and cool through the air. "His insight may be unconventional, but it has proven useful." Unconventional. That was a polite way of saying accidental hero with a background in logistics and an unfortunate tendency to make jokes under pressure. The delegate to his left, a creature with translucent skin and drifting internal organs that glowed like jellyfish lanterns, spoke through a device pinned to its collar. "Your presence shifts the balance of alliances. The Queen's bond with you is now a strategic liability, or advantage, depending." Lucas smiled weakly. "I like to think of myself as a surprise variable, like when a vending machine gives you 2 snacks instead of 1. The delegate blinked its 4 eyes out of sync. "This analogy is confusing and possibly insulting." "Then it's working," Lucas whispered to Soraya. The Queen ignored him, turning to another advisor who projected a star map onto the air between them. The attempt on my life originated from orbit. A disguised signal relay was planted aboard the Mermathi delegation cruiser. We suspect a third-party instigator, someone with interest in destabilizing the summit. The holographic projection zoomed in on a triangular cluster of satellites blinking ominously in red. Lucas leaned forward. Wait, that pattern, those relays are illegally modified Proxim-class beacons, used for tight beam encrypted bursts. You can mask an entire assault command behind one. This is diplomacy, he muttered to Soraya, who stood beside him in ceremonial armor, her long ears twitching subtly each time a firework went off, too close to their platform. It's called soft power, she replied. Presence is persuasion. Right. So we're not just a couple of high-value targets riding a glass coaster above a crowd of strangers in a city full of known espionage agents. Correct. We are extremely high-value targets riding a glass coaster above a crowd of strangers in a city full of known espionage agents. Great. Just checking. He tried to smile at the gathered onlookers below, many of whom were waving glowing ribbons and shouting words he hoped were festive and not curse-laden insults. One of them tossed a small fruit-like object at him, which exploded into a burst of purple mist upon hitting the floor of the gondola. Fan mail? He asked. Biochemical confetti fruit, Soraya said, brushing the powder off her shoulder. Totally harmless, usually. Lucas looked over the edge of the gondola and tried not to think about how far down usually went in terms of safety standards. The festival was a distraction, a planned public appearance to reaffirm unity, hope, and all those other fine words people preferred hearing, rather than, we suspect someone in this crowd wants to assassinate the Queen again. Lucas had insisted on attending, partly because he felt responsible, and partly because he still didn't understand half of what was happening and hoped being in the thick of it might help. Also, there had been a rumor that the fermented slug nectar was actually quite good if you pinched your nose. An hour later, after approximately 17 rounds of politely declining alien snacks that looked suspiciously like sentient moss, Lucas found himself backstage in a draped chamber with soft lighting and several guards pretending not to eavesdrop on every syllable. Soraya sat on a bench made of something that shifted colors when touched. You've drawn attention, she said. Every intelligence network within 100 parsecs has logged your biosignature. Let me guess, I'm trending. Worse, you're being auctioned. He blinked. Come again? An encrypted market opened this morning. Your genetic profile, your diplomatic immunity, and your proximity to the soul shard have all been itemized for potential abduction. Lucas sat heavily on the edge of the bench. I always wanted to be famous, just not on the black market. She didn't laugh, but her ear twitched in that way he was beginning to interpret as genuine amusement. You're taking this well. That's because the slug nectar has kicked in. Either that, or I'm having a mild allergic reaction to the powdered confetti fruit. I can't feel my eyebrows. Good, you'll blend in better. She pulled out a data tablet and handed it to him. A blueprint loaded, complex schematics overlaid with blinking markers. This is the Cyrex covert operations ship. It docked under a forged registry 3 days ago. They're planning an infiltration during the next diplomatic assembly. Let me guess. They're after the soul shard. Again, Soraya nodded. And if they can't get it, they may settle for the bonded soul instead. Lucas squinted at the blueprint. So me? Yes. Well, on the bright side, at least I'm finally the protagonist of my own kidnapping story. She didn't smile, but her fingers brushed his for a moment, deliberate, brief. You're not just a protagonist anymore. That comment lingered longer than it should have, hanging in the air like the last note of a song he hadn't realized was playing. He coughed and tapped the screen. What's this room here? That's their central psionic null field. It suppresses neural resonance. If they trap us inside, the bond between us is severed, Lucas finished. Got it. So avoid that room. It's worse than that. Without resonance, the soul shard reverts to its unbound state. Anyone could claim it. Lucas exhaled. Why do I get the feeling you should have led with that? She stood. Because you need to understand the stakes before we face them. He stood as well. So what's the plan? Tonight, we infiltrate the Cyrex ship before the assembly. steal their field disruptor, and disable the null zone. Us? As in you and me? We're going full espionage now. Would you prefer I send someone else with your soul attached to them? Point taken. Lead on, your majesty of the sneaky. They left through an unmarked exit that opened into a private hangar. The ship Soraya had chosen was small, dark, and decidedly unroyal. Lucas paused before stepping inside. Just curious, how many covert operations have you done before? 3, successfully. And how many not successfully? 2. We don't speak of those. The flight was short but tense, lit only by the dull orange of approaching dusk and the quiet hum of a ship pretending not to exist. They docked onto the underbelly of the Cyrex vessel with the silence of professionals, or at least of 2 people very determined not to get shot. Inside, they moved through tight corridors painted in matte black and lined with coolant pipes. Lucas tried not to think about all the ways things could go wrong. Soraya moved like she belonged there, each step efficient and quiet. Lucas tried to imitate her and succeeded in tripping only once, catching himself on a wall that promptly hissed at him. Structural breathing panels, Soraya whispered. Don't lean on them. Good tip, he whispered back. Add that to the growing list of alien things that hate me. They reached the null field room without incident. The hum of dampened resonance filled the air, a cold, hollow feeling that made Lucas's teeth itch. Inside the chamber, 2 guards stood watch over the disruptor unit, which resembled a very angry espresso machine. Soraya motioned for silence. She tapped a device at her belt. A second later, the lights flickered. The guards looked at each other. Lucas, taking his cue, lunged forward with a noise that he hoped sounded heroic and not like someone choking on a protein bar. The fight was short and involved more elbowing than actual skill. One guard hit the wall and got stuck in a self-sealing stasis gel. The other tripped on Lucas's foot, screamed something untranslatable, and face-planted into a panel. See? Lucas panted. I have combat instincts. They're just weirdly timed. Soraya deactivated the field. The hum vanished. The soul shard in Lucas's pocket pulsed warm again. You did well, she said, touching his arm. He gave a shaky grin. Does that mean I get to pick the next mission? Because I vote for one involving room service and 0 magnetic mines. She led him out through the shadowy corridor with a smirk. We'll negotiate. Lucas wasn't sure if she meant the next mission or the future in general. Either way, he was starting to feel like he'd already agreed to something much bigger than either of them fully understood. The throne room was not supposed to smell like burnt coolant and emergency foam, but here they were. Lucas stood in the center of the fractured floor, still holding the soul shard in his hand like it was a stress ball. While around him, half the royal guards scrambled to restore control, and the other half tried to clean up what remained of the Cyrex infiltrators. One of them had somehow wedged himself into an ornamental fountain shaped like a spiral nebula. He refused to come out, muttering something about diplomatic immunity and interstellar gluten allergies. Tell me again, Lucas said, why the final phase of the Cyrex plan involved hijacking the royal AI and making it host a mandatory poetry slam? Soraya, wearing scorched armor and a single eyebrow raised, gestured to the shattered core console. Because their intelligence officer is obsessed with Terran spoken word, they thought it would destabilize the monarchy through lyrical embarrassment. Well, it nearly worked. I've never seen a room full of ambassadors look so panicked at the phrase, cosmic yearning in my cortical yearning. She winced. Yes, you almost started a diplomatic incident with that line. Hey, in my defense, I was improvising while dodging plasma bolts, and maybe expressing myself. One of the guards passed them at a brisk jog, saluting Soraya while avoiding eye contact with Lucas. Ever since the explosion, everyone had started calling him soulbound, usually in a tone that suggested reverence mixed with deep confusion. He watched as Soraya bent down to examine a collapsed support beam, her long ears twitching slightly as she processed incoming reports through her neural link. She had been doing that a lot lately, processing, calculating, protecting. Always composed, always a queen. And yet, he'd seen her throw herself in front of an energy blast meant for him. She hadn't even hesitated. The memory refused to leave. He cleared his throat. So, I guess that's it then. Cyrex foiled, AI unhijacked, poetry purged. Mostly. We'll need at least 2 cycles to restore the throne, AI's emotional subroutines. It keeps trying to narrate political briefings in iambic pentameter. You're welcome. For what? For saving the monarchy from interpretive dance. That's what it was building up to, you know? She looked at him, her gaze softening for a moment. You joke a lot when you're unsettled. I joke a lot in general, but yes, this is me unsettled. Look, Soraya. He hesitated, gripping the soul shard like it might give him courage. Back when you gave me this, I didn't understand what it meant. I thought it was just some ceremonial trinket with good lighting effects. She smiled. The lighting is programmable, but now I get it. The bond, it's not just symbolic, it's real. I can feel it. Not in some magical fantasy way, but like you're always there, just under my skin. Not watching, not judging, just present. I am, she said simply. I know, and I'm not sure I'm the kind of guy who should have something this important. I mean, my most valuable skill until recently was being able to make a grilled cheese sandwich using nothing but a plasma torch and sarcasm. You undervalue yourself, severely. That's probably true, but I also know that I've changed. A lot. I used to think responsibility was a thing you handed to people who wore fancier shoes. But now, he glanced around the ruined chamber. Now I think I understand why you carry so much. Why you gave me this. Not because I earned it, but because you believed I could. She stepped closer. You've proven it. He held out the soul shard. So what happens now? Do I give it back? Do I keep it? Do I get a pension plan? She took his hand instead of the shard. The bond cannot be undone. Not without both of us choosing to sever it. That's not something we can decide lightly. Lucas laughed. I barely trust myself to choose cereal in the morning. But you chose to protect my people, to stand by me when you had every reason to run. That tells me more than any ceremony. He looked at their joined hands. Then I guess we're stuck with each other. Or elevated by each other. Don't get poetic. That's how this whole thing almost fell apart. She rolled her eyes, but her fingers tightened on his. Later, after the fires were extinguished and the dignitaries had been unpanicked, the palace held an emergency celebration. Apparently, royal protocols required a symbolic unifying event after any coup attempt. And if there was one thing this planet knew how to do, it was throw a party with unnecessary grandeur. Lucas stood on the dais beside Soraya as holograms of stars danced around them, programmed to simulate celestial alignment. He was wearing robes he didn't understand and shoes that made him walk like a newborn deer. A small alien child wandered up to him and tugged his sleeve. Are you a prince now? Lucas crouched. Technically, no. I'm more like an emotionally confused space consultant. The child frowned. Is that higher or lower than a duke? Depends on the planet and the number of laser burns involved. Satisfied, the child scampered off, probably to tell someone that the soulbound was either royalty or a baked good. Soraya joined him, her gown woven with strands of reactive light. You handled that well. I lie to children all the time. It's a gift. She tilted her head. You still doubt yourself. Every 5 minutes. But I'm starting to think that might just be part of the job. You're right. I hate when you say that. No, you don't. He didn't. Later, as the crowd celebrated and fireworks danced through artificial constellations above them, Soraya pulled him aside. She held out a small, crystalline object, not unlike the soul shard, but different, less radiant, more intricate. This is not another binding, is it? No, she said. It's a key. To what? To my private quarters. Subtle. I'm a queen. Subtlety is survival. He took it. So, what now? Now, she said, we find out what loyalty truly means when no one's watching. He looked out over the city that had once tried to kill him, the people who now called him guardian, and the woman who had bound her soul to his without asking for anything in return. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being lost. All right, he said, but I'm still keeping the fancy shoes. She smiled. Deal. And as the stars wheeled above them in quiet choreography, Lucas held the key in one hand, the shard in the other, and knew for the first time in his life that he wasn't just part of someone else's story. He was home.